you're confined to your home for health reasons and then a storm hits, wiping out your power for more than a week.
It is a real-life scenario for many home health care patients across the state. Channel 7's Elisa Boxer visited one such patient at his home in Newburgh.
Come over here. Come on, that's a boy. Yeah.
It's day number 8 without power for George Grover. Day number 8 of using lantern light and asking friends for food. He's disabled, diabetic, and suffering from severe depression. He's also a home health care patient, one of many across the state whose situations took a dramatic turn for the worse with the onset of Ice Storm 98.
I've got bad back, I've got hip problems, and the doctor doesn't even want me to move around too much. He's got a wheelchair coming out to me eventually.
Home health care workers say a lot of their more rural patients, like George Grover, feel isolated to begin with. Add to that sub-zero temperatures and no power, and a tough situation can get unbearable.
They increase the emotional stress of being isolated, not able to have contact with normal outside resources that they may have normally. Phone lines being down has been an incredible impact on a lot of our elderly who have been isolated.
Besides the physical and emotional strain on these patients, there is also the financial strain and the physical challenge of the healthcare worker getting to the patient's home. So even though the ice storm of the century has loosened its grip on this state, for people like George Grover, that grip is still holding tight. In Newburgh, Elisa Boxer, Channel 7 News.
Mainers are getting a helping hand in the fight to rebuild their lives.
Vice President Al Gore paid a visit to the Pine Tree State today. Channel 7's Keith Sterling was with the Vice President and has more from the newsroom. Keith?
Good evening, Dale and Carrie. The Vice President brought the news that Maine will receive millions in recovery assistance, but he also brought with him a sense of encouragement and reassurance. The Vice President arrived in Brunswick this morning to begin his day-long look at the devastation from last week's ice storm. He began with an aerial tour of southern Maine. Then the Vice President made his way to the capital city, where he delivered a message to the people of the Pine Tree State.
In a time like this, you need to know that you are not in this alone. You've joined together and you're helping each other. And as I said before, your spirits are high.
Maine will receive $28 million from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Portland will see most of the money at $2.5 million. Lewiston will get $1.3 million. Bangor, $1.2 million. And Auburn, $745,000.
It's been a very unusual, catastrophic storm. Some have told me they believe that it is the worst disaster from a storm in the history of Maine.
Marcus Shkanian of Central Maine Power says the federal government's involvement is vital to the state's future.
This is truly a federal disaster, and to the extent that we can get any help, both on the public sector and the private sector, Maine is going to need it. This has been a real setback to our economy, and yet people are pulling together, and if the federal government can add to that mix, it would be much appreciated.
Our first priority, obviously, is going to be, as I said, to do everything we possibly can to get y'all back on your feet as quickly as possible. And we will be there in every way we are legally entitled to be there. And we will we'll push the limits to give you every bit of help we can.
The state of Maine will also receive $5.5 million from the government's home investment program. Vice President is on his way back to Washington at this hour, but he left behind some encouraging news for the people of Maine. Dale, Carrie.
And the people of Maine, several people from Maine were there with the Vice President. What was their reaction to his visit?
Yeah, they were, and I think it kind of put it in perspective for them, Dale. You know, I think a lot of people have felt isolated. This is a very tough time and kind of secluded up here in Maine, but I think the Vice President's visit and, of course, the money that's coming to Maine really shows that the nation's leaders and the country as a whole are paying attention to the problems that we're having here in Maine.
Throughout last week's ice storm, thousands have gone above and beyond the call of duty to help their fellow Mainers.
When miles of Bangor hydro lines came crashing down, leaving thousands in Washington County in the dark, the Maine Army National Guard stepped in to lend a helping hand. Channel 7's Greg McQuaid introduces us to a few guardsmen who are helping Mainers see the light.
When soldiers are called into action, it often means to fight an enemy in some distant land. But for Maine's Army National Guard, today's battle is right here at home.
Yeah, the soldiers are really doing a good job here. We've got about 128 that we mobilized starting on Monday, and those folks, no problems, all volunteer, came down here to help out with Washington County's problems and help Bangor Hydro in their effort to restore their service to their customers in Washington County.
50, this Kennebec 14, over.
They're here to clean up miles of Bangor Hydro's utility poles splintered during Ice Storm 98. The 120 poles carried power to Washington County. During the cleanup, these volunteers have had to deal with hazardous conditions, including wind chill temperatures that reached 40 below.
The biggest thing is the icy conditions. Yesterday was the cold weather and wind and the ice on top of that, so we don't have as much to deal with today.
Initially, the job of cleaning up 8 miles of electrical poles was to have taken 4 days, but the quick and efficient work of the Maine Army National Guard has slashed that to 2.
The attitude is great. The guys are really happy to finally, some of the soldiers, it's the first time in their careers that they've been able to help out in emergency relief, and they're really pleased to be able to do their citizen soldier mission. You know, they always prepare to go to combat, but the citizen soldier effort is what really makes them want to be part of this organization.
And when the Washington County community finds itself back to normal, the members of the Maine Army National Guard will look back and think, this was one battle they didn't mind fighting. In Columbia Falls, Greg McQuaid, Channel 7 News.